Over the past few years, retro gaming and emulation and handheld gaming in general have been extremely hot topics. These devices, especially since the drop of the Nintendo Switch, have become more and more popular, and more devices have started to come out these past few years. We've seen amazing emulation devices for things like Game Boy and Game Boy Color with the analog pocket that can play original cartridges and original hardware. They're also making an N64 version coming up within the next few years. The company Ambernick has also been abusing our nostalgia lately and dropping devices like the RG SP, which has been a clone of the Game Boy Advance SP. They also just dropped an original Game Boy Advance clone that emulates and plays software perfectly. Then on top of that, you've got higher end emulation devices like the Odin 2 or the Retroid Pocket 5 that can play older systems perfectly in their native resolution. So many different options nowadays for retro gamers or people who want to relive some older classic titles. But there's one system that none of these companies have been able to recreate for us, and of course I'm talking about the Nintendo DS. Since this thing has two screens, the emulation is absolutely trash on most devices, and it kind of gets ruined by the fact that you have to squeeze in both of those displays. As somebody who grew up with the DS and has so much nostalgia, I've recently wanted to dive back into the amazing catalog that the DS offers, but I didn't have an original DS to begin with, so I went down the rabbit hole and went on a mission to try and find the best possible way to experience these games in the modern age. But along that journey, I didn't realize that I would stumble upon one of, if not the best gaming handhelds of all time, even to this day, the DSi XL. There's a reason why the Nintendo DS is the best-selling gaming handheld of all time. It is seriously a timeless masterpiece, and no other company, like I said, has been able to replicate or create an even near identical experience to playing original hardware. I think Nintendo knew that they struck gold here, and that's why they wanted to extend its lifespan as long as possible, and they released so many different models and different versions of the DS. It was originally released in 2004 with, of course, the classic brick shape. I mean, the original DS looked so goofy and bulky, but back in the day, it was pretty revolutionary to see two screens on a gaming handheld. That was over 20 years ago, which is just crazy to even think about. And then 2 years later, following the original DS, Nintendo dropped one of the best redesigns for a system that I think we've ever seen with the DS Lite. This thing was so much more sleek, so much more compact, comfortable to use, better buttons, better screens. It was a phenomenal upgrade, and I think this is the device that most people think of when they hear the Nintendo DS. And then another 2 years later, Nintendo decided to drop the DSi, which just was kind of similar to the DS Lite, but introduced a couple of new features, and it had a camera and a couple of other better software upgrades too. Finally, in 2009, Nintendo decided to drop the magnum opus, in my opinion, of all the DSs with the DSi XL. This is what I stumbled upon when trying to find the best way to play DS games, and it's because of course, the bigger screens and the bigger form factor. The screens on the DSi XL were advertised to be 93% larger than those on the DS Lite and the DSi. And this is where things can get a little bit subjective right now. When I was looking up and researching the best way to play DS games, a lot of people thought that the more condensed version and the more condensed screens on the DSi and DS Lite looked better with the pixels, but I actually found that the DSi XL screens look way better than any other device because of their size and because they're actually still in the native resolution. So yes, the pixels look slightly bigger, but they're still the perfect dimensions and the perfect resolution of these DS games. So you don't really lose any quality, things just get slightly bigger. And to me, it still looks fantastic and is the best and superior way to play DS games. And now it's time to mention what most people bring up when you mention DS games, and it's why don't you just buy a 3DS? Now, I think these people seriously need to get their eyes checked, because on a 3DS, when you play DS games, it looks so bad. I don't know if you've ever tried to run original DS games on a 3DS, but it blows out the resolution and everything looks so bad in comparison to original DS hardware. And that's obviously because it's stretching the pixels on the 3DS because it's not the original resolution. So it looks horrible in my opinion. It's not the actual best way to play these DS games. There is a way to keep the native resolution on the 3DS. I believe if you hold down start or something, it'll actually keep the resolution the same, but then you get these huge black borders all across your game and what you're seeing. The build quality and design of this thing is amazing. There's a reason why clamshells are fantastic, and there's a reason why the Anbernic SP and the Retroid Flip were so popular in the past few years, because the clamshell design is so incredible. I mean, you really can't beat it. It's amazing to keep a device in your pocket or in your bag and not have to worry about scratching the screens, because the folding and clamshell design actually protects those screens. And then on top of that, putting the device to sleep is so easy. You just have to shut it and you can resume and pick up your game any other time you want to open up your device. And because the device is actually built for adults and for bigger hands, it fits so nicely. The DSi and the DS Lite are a little bit too small for me and it gets kind of crampy, but on this device, everything fits like a glove. And the D-pad here is also a lot different. You've got clickier buttons in comparison to the DS Lite, and that to me is actually a huge win. Some people have a lot of nostalgia and a preference for the squishier D-pad and squishier buttons that were on the previous models like the DS Lite and the original DS, but for me, I really enjoy these buttons on the DSi XL. The speakers are amazing, and hearing, old Pokemon OST on original DSi XL speakers is just an incredible experience. And then the battery life too is still lasting me anywhere from 11 to 15 hours, which on an old battery and one that hasn't been replaced is just ridiculous to say. And then finally, the thing that really separates the DSi XL or the DSi lineup in general is just the improved software whenever you launch the device and start up the device. It was kind of reminiscent of the Wii, and it wanted you to feel like you were playing, maybe a home console, but on the go. So the DSi has some incredible home menu systems that I love navigating to play my games. And that leads us into one of the best parts about this device is the custom firmware that you can install and the modding that you can do to any DSi device. So there's plenty of guides out there, but for me personally, I modded it first with the Twilight menu, which lets you play and, obviously run any ROMs that you do have for the Nintendo DS. I honestly didn't want my device to feel like it was hacked or modded at all. So in order to bypass the Twilight menu, I then had to install Haya custom firmware, which then lets you add your ROMs and other games to the original looking stock DSi menu system. It sounds confusing, but essentially you have to have Twilight menu installed to then install Haya CFW, which then allows you to make the device look like it's running stock OS, and you can add your ROMs to the main menu without having to go through any other type of menu to play your games, if that makes sense. The process was honestly kind of confusing, and it took me a lot of scouring to find the right proper YouTube videos, but they're out there if you look deep enough. You could also just get an R4 card if that's your thing and you want to just bypass all of that extra crap and just want something simple. You could get this from Amazon. I think it's like 15 bucks, and you can put your ROMs on here, but you will have to go through the menu system of the R4 card, which, like I just said, I'm trying to bypass all menus. I just want to launch the device and then click on my game. That's it. And now we can finally talk about the amazing game library that the Nintendo DS offers. You've got fantastic titles like Animal Crossing Wild World, Final Fantasy, Fire Emblem, Mario Kart DS, Chrono Trigger, Mario and Luigi RPGs, the classic Zelda games for the Nintendo DS, but more than anything else, the reason why I wanted to play the DS was for the Pokemon games. If you've been around the emulation scene or the retro handheld scene, a lot of people end up just picking up devices to have as their main Pokemon machine. And for me, since I love Gen 4 and Gen 5 Pokemon and think that you can't get any better than their aesthetic and their art style, as well as the games in general, I picked up the DS to specifically play these Pokemon games. And I have not been disappointed. Playing the Pokemon games on a DSi XL has been a surreal experience, especially because I've never owned a DSi XL, but playing the Pokemon games on the bigger screens, it is incredible. You've got the comfortable form factor of the Pokemon games then being run in the background that look exactly as they should because of the native resolution. And like I said, no other emulation device can find and match the experience as the DSi XL. Because we're running custom firmware on this thing, we also have the opportunity to emulate Game Boy Advance games on the top screen. So you can load up other Pokemon games, or honestly Pokemon ROM hacks, or any GBA game that you want to play, and this thing runs it great and it looks awesome on the top screen. There's a little bit of some black borders, but for the most part it looks great. There's also a couple of custom Nintendo DS ROM hacks that you could play. There's this awesome Super Mario Galaxy DS version that you can play and have a good time on, as well as some other Pokemon ROM hacks which aren't as common as the GBA ROM hacks, but there's still some great ones out there. But of course, like any other device, there is no such thing as perfect, and there are a few caveats that I definitely feel like are nitpicks with the DSi XL. To start things off with, the colors for this thing are so goofy, bro. Like, I get that it was advertised and specifically sold to older people, but like, who's picking these colors, man? Who is deciding on going with these DSi XL colors? I don't understand. I mean, burgundy and maybe the black one were the best that I could find, but the other ones were so weird, dude. The blue was okay, but I feel like we're getting horrible options for the colorways. There's no GBA or GB slot at the bottom, so if you remember, the DS Lite and the original DS model had a cartridge slot to play Game Boy games, and this does not have that, along with the other DSi. And I can only imagine, man, if this thing had an actual slot at the bottom to play GBA games or GB games, this would be incredible. But like I mentioned earlier, if you mod and install custom firmware on this thing, you can just launch and emulate Game Boy Advance games through the custom software. So that kind of puts a band-aid over the fact that there's no GBA slot, and you can play all your games perfectly fine regardless. I don't think you'd ever be able to top this if it did have that slot for those games, but unfortunately it does not. And then last but not least, the stupid stylus, bro. I bought this on eBay and it didn't come with an OEM stylus, and I can't find an original stylus anywhere. I don't think anybody's actually selling their only stylus for their DSi XL, so the only option that you have is to go with a third-party stylus, but none of those match the same colors. So I'm here trying to pick, you know, a stylus that matches this burgundy color, but they're all just red and they don't actually fit the device. So I end up not purchasing a stylus anyway. So I just end up not ever using it and not having a pen to slip into this little hole, which is so infuriating for me. But that's about it. I mean, other than that, the device is flawless for Nintendo DS games and honestly just playing games on the go. You can't beat the build quality, the form factor, the clamshell design. Everything about the DSi XL for me has been dang near perfect. And if I was to recommend a device in today's day and age, so long as you're a fan of the DS games, I would recommend the DSi XL because I really don't think you can go wrong with this thing. The larger screens, the durable build quality, the excellent game library, it has so much to offer, and I seriously think anybody who wants to relive their childhood or even dive into the DS games if they haven't already, you just can't go wrong with this. But yeah, that's about it. I felt like yapping about this device for the whole video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all the new people here who have been tapping in. If you haven't gotten a DS and you're looking for the perfect DS, the DSi XL is a no-brainer to me and something that has been definitely in my arsenal for the past year or so, and I'm really happy that I purchased this thing. But yeah, that's it. I hope you all enjoyed. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next one.